Gentlemen, we get them to start. Hafa-day, ladies and gentlemen. The Committee on Finance and Taxation, General Government Operations, and Youth Development now convenes this hearing. For the record, my name is Senator Mary Camacho Torres. I'm the Vice Chairman of the committee. Our chairman is on his way. He's fallen victim to the FESPAC traffic logistics outside, but he will be here momentarily. But in the interim and in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and convene this meeting on his behalf. In accordance with the open government law, public notices for today's proceedings were sent to the media on May 11th, 2016, and again on May 20th, 2016. For the record, today is Monday, May 23rd, 2016, and the time is now 10:15 a.m. The committee will hear and accept testimony, both oral and written, on the following items. Bill number 141-33 COR, introduced by Vice Speaker Benjamin Cruz, which is, I'll actually defer to the speaker to present his bill. For now, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Senator Frank Uggan. To my right, Vice Speaker B.J. Cruz, and myself. Some general housekeeping rules. We have a list, a sign-in sheet, and I see that many people have already signed up to present either oral testimony or written testimony. And the only thing that I want to point out is should you come up to speak, or if you decide to give oral testimony, you're welcome to at any point just indicate to the staff on the side. And if you should come up to speak, please introduce yourself before speaking and make sure your microphone is turned on. So I would like to, at this point, ask that our Vice Speaker give a little bit of a summary on his bill and introduce the title.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Bill 141 is an act to amend Title I of Section 6101 of Article 1 relative to clarifying the definition of electronic cigarettes, raising the minimum age of legal access to tobacco products and electronic cigarettes to 21 years of age, and citing this act as the Youth Protection Act of 2015, which I guess is 2016 now. First, I want to begin by thanking Chairman Nicolas for agreeing to hear Bill 141. My proposal to raise the minimum age for legal access to tobacco and nicotine products to 21. Mr. Chairman, I introduced this measure for one simple reason: to save lives. Lives taken by the drug that kills more Americans annually than the total number of U.S. servicemen who died in World War II. Just as it was in World War II, our distance from the contiguous United States has not protected us from the death, sickness, and suffering felt by this global epidemic. Each year, approximately 365 sons and daughters to Guam die from diseases directly associated with smoking. For our children, this tragedy may be even worse. According to 2013 data from the annual survey conducted by the Guam Department of Public Health and Social Services, 1 in 5 Chamorro children has had at least one cigarette in the last 30 days. That means that 6,000 of Guam's public school children smoke today, and that as many as 2,000 of these kids will become daily smokers and likely die prematurely from smoking-related illnesses. Think about that for a moment. If we knew that as many as 6,000 of our school children smoke crack cocaine in the last 30 days, and that as many of them as 2,000 would die of it, what would we do to save them? Mr. Chairman, we're not without options that will help us save at least some of our children from a lifetime of addiction followed by a painful death. The successful enactment of a number of local tobacco control legislation, such as raising taxes, limiting smoking areas, regulating promotion and discounting schemes, has resulted in a marked decline in reported usage. But what we are doing in Guam doesn't seem to begin to counter industry-wide efforts to obtain new smokers under 21, as tobacco companies collectively spend $9.6 billion billion on advertising and promotions each year. In the United States versus Philip Morris, Judge Gladys Kessler, and this was a case in the big tobacco settlement case, stated as follows, quote, "From the 1950s to the present, different defendants at different times and using different methods have intentionally marketed to young people under the age of 21 in order to recruit replacement smokers to ensure the economic future of the tobacco industry. So how do we fight back?" Recent studies published in March 2015 report by the Institute of Medicine indicate that raising the smoking age to 21 will substantially improve public health, adding 4.1 million more years to the lives of the next generation of American adults, and preventing nearly 250,000 premature deaths, including 45,000 from lung cancer among people born between the year 2020 and 2019. The study also found that a majority of underage smokers rely on social sources such as family and friends to get tobacco. Inasmuch as raising the legal age to 19 would not have much of an effect on reducing social sources for high school students, raising the age to 21, on the other hand, could mean that those who can legally buy tobacco are less likely to be in the same social network as these students. Moreover, increasing the legal age for tobacco to 21 is predicted to cut smoking rates by an estimated 12%. A study explains that the significant drop to these dynamics of the developing brain state that the parts of the brain most responsible for decision-making, impulse control, sensation-seeking, and susceptibility to peer pressure continue to develop and change through adulthood. And adolescent brains are uniquely vulnerable to the effects of nicotine, end of quote. Despite these clear scientific evidence, I know that people will continue to assert that raising the minimum age of legal access to these by 3 years won't really change anything. But even tobacco companies have admitted in their own internal documents that if they don't capture new users by the early 20s, it is very unlikely they ever will. In 1982, R.J. Reynolds researchers stated, quote, "If a man has never smoked by age 18, the odds are 3 to 1 he never will. By age 24, the odds are 20 to 1. End of quote. Other internal memoranda obtained during the state tobacco lawsuits of the 1990s revealed that an internal Philip Morris report written in January 21st of 1986 warned that, quote, "Raising the legal minimum age for cigarette purchasers to 21 could gut our key young adult market, 17 to 20, where we sell about 25 billion cigarettes and enjoy a 70% market share." Even big tobacco itself, Mr. Chairman, acknowledges the powerful impact of this measure would have before us. Still, some in our country believe that this legislation inappropriately restricts the personal choice of competent adults. Opponents, comprised primarily of tobacco companies and tobacco retailers, continue to chant, quote, "Old enough to vote, old enough to join the military, old enough to smoke," end of quote. But tobacco use is not a right or a privilege. It is an addictive and deadly activity. For the overwhelming majority of smokers, tobacco use is not, and in fact, an adult choice. It is the result of an addiction that began when they were smokers, was in high school or younger, and one that they are trying hard to kick. Even DOD, Department of Defense, recognizes the clear and present danger smoking poses to our nation's servicemen. In support of Hawaii's newly passed 21 law, Bill Doherty, spokesman for the Navy Region Hawaii, stated, quote, "We see it as a fitness and readiness issue. When we can prevent sailors from smoking or using tobacco, if we can get them to quit, then that improves their fitness and readiness, and it saves them from a ton of money too," end of quote. Likewise, Rear Admiral John Fuller, commander of Navy Region Hawaii, reaffirmed the military support for increasing the age of legal access, stating, quote, "If someone is young enough to fight for their country, they should be free from addiction to a deadly drug, end of quote. Moreover, there is nothing natural or immutable about a minimum age of 18. For years, under the traditional British common law, the, quote, age of majority was 21. In the U.S., the voting age has now been lowered from 21 to 18, and as a reaction to the turmoil of the Vietnam War. Soon thereafter, states began raising their drinking age to 18 to 21, after realizing that teens were disproportionately responsible for drunk driving accidents. More recently, states that have sanctioned the legal use of marijuana, a drug far less deadly than tobacco, have set 21 as the minimum age. In short, it has long been the case that there are different minimum ages at different times and in different purposes. Finally, Mr. Chairman, recognizing many of the same arguments against nicotine addiction, it is ubiquitously available to minors and its potential negative health impacts. The Food and Drug Administration last month, extended its authority over electronic cigarettes, which will go into effect in August of this year. Sadly, the rule which bans the sale of e-cigarettes to those under the age of 18 does not go far enough. Researchers at the University of California created an extract from the, quote, smoke of e-cigarettes and used it to treat human cells in the lab. The exposed cells demonstrated DNA damage and died far sooner than those left untreated. Nicotine-free e-cigarettes cause 50% more DNA strand breaks, while the damage rose threefold in just 8 weeks from the e-cigarettes containing nicotine. One of the lead researchers, Dr. Jessica Wang Rodriguez of the University of California, concluded, quote, based on the evidence, e-cigarettes were no better than smoking regular cigarettes, end of quote. Conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I would be remiss if I did not thank the Tobacco Control Action, the Guam chapter of the American Cancer Society, Youth for Youth, Guam public health officials, and the Guam Non-Communicable Disease Task Force. Together, we have made meaningful strides in protecting our community, and this measure would not have gotten this far without their hard work and commitment. But as long as billions of dollars are continuously spent on addicting our children, our struggle remains. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. At this time, I'd like to invite certain individuals to join us at the table for us to receive some written oral testimony. I invite Dr. John Ray Titano, Mr. James Gillum, and is Miss Jeanette Nyangro Garrett here? Not yet. Is there anyone that has a time constraint that would like to come forward at this time? I know that there are two doctors. Please approach the podium. Thank you. And if we can start with Dr. Titano, please state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am John Ray Titano, and I'm a physician. Today, I hold many titles within the community, but my most important title today is that of a parent, grandparent, and community member. I'm here to support Bill 141-33, the Youth Protection Act of 2015, relative to raising the legal age of acquiring cigarettes and purchasing cigarettes from 18 to 21. We all know that smoking causes horrific and terrible diseases among adults, namely lung cancer, coronary disease, chronic lung disease, killing many of us earlier with suffering and in indescribable pain. Do we not have a responsibility as parents and as community to protect our children from harm when their adolescent brains are not fully developed and more prone to addiction, as the parts of the brain most responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and susceptibility to peer pressure are still developing? Do we not have a responsibility to protect our children from early nicotine addiction and ravages of smoking that will most certainly lead to an earlier death, an unhealthy life, and loss of productivity, and unable to realize their dreams? Philip Morris, the cigarette giant, reported in 1986, and I quote, raising the legal minimum age for cigarette purchaser to 21 could gut our key young adult market, where we sell about 25 billion cigarettes. We as a community have lost protecting our children from harm by others? And should we not protect our children from harm by the tobacco companies who so brazenly target our youth with tobacco products to ensure a steady market for their deadly product? Let us say enough is enough and raise the legal age to purchase cigarette products from 18 to 21. The Institute of Medicine projected that if the legal age were raised to 21, by the time teenagers became adults, smoking prevalence would be cut by 12%. That translates into lower incidence and prevalence of cancer, heart disease, and lung disease. We as a community have a responsibility to protect our children and to protect their children and to reduce the disease burden of non-communicable disease on Guam. Bill 141-33 is a step in the right direction, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Taitano. You proceed.
Buenas and half a day, Madam Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Senators, and most importantly, to the people of Guam. I'm Fernando Esteves, and I oppose the amendments to Bill 141-33 COR in relation to raising the legal age to use or purchase tobacco products to 21 years of age. I'd like to lead with a quote from the former President Dwight Eisenhower. A people that values its privileges above its principles soon loses both. Freedom grants us the privilege to be here this morning, to be free to think and discuss, and the freedom to do this without persecution and governmental judgment. Having been to countries and experiencing firsthand that freedom isn't a right afforded to all, but a privilege. Many may think this is a far stretch, but the reality is based on history. We may think it's okay to tilt, but eventually we hit a precipice and we tip and then we fall. Freedom is defended by those who defend its principle, whether on the front lines or here at home. A person without principle is someone who can't be trusted because they stand for nothing. So I ask you, Mr. Vice Speaker, what do you believe in and what do you stand for? Allow me to cite a recent example that perplexes me. On April 2nd, 2016, you voted in favor of Bill 279-33, which allows eligible 17-year-olds to register and vote. As a senator, you are on the record in your belief that young adults have enough reasoning to help shape the future of our island, but they cannot choose whether or not they want to smoke. At 17 years old, an individual can enlist in the military. At 18, young men have to register for selective service. At 18, young adults are liable for civil suits and are treated as adults in criminal cases. We force upon them multiple degrees of responsibility, yet we don't think that they have enough reasoning to decide whether they want to or do not want to smoke. They're asked to put their life on the line based on principles others may believe in, but we don't allow them to decide what to do with their own lives. It's no secret, I myself am a tobacco user. I began using tobacco at the age of 22 after my first near-death experience in Iraq in 2007. I was 22, but I could have been 18, 19, or 20. I've continued until recently where I quit to set an example. The important takeaway is that it was my choice. Superb leadership is done through example and shouldn't be forced on others because you can. Mr. Vice Speaker, allow me to take an alternative approach because you may not understand these concepts of freedom having never worn its banner on your shoulder on the front lines. Maybe principles aren't appropriate in this forum. Let's talk precedents. As a lawyer, you understand the impact of setting precedents. In law, legal rulings set precedents in other court cases. So what precedent are you attempting to set here? Is it that young adults are adults but not quite? Or is it that the government should make every attempt to place more restrictions on things that are dangerous? We all know tobacco use is hazardous to our health. Motor vehicles are a potential death machine, yet we license adolescents at the age of 16. Is it your intention to raise the age to drive to 21 because young adults and adolescents are incapable of reasoning? Should the courts try anyone under the age of 21 as a child? Should we allow fast food to be eaten only by those who are 21 years and older? Should we only allow adults 21 years or older to purchase products with high fructose corn syrup because it's been scientifically proven to be the leading cause of cardiovascular conditions in otherwise healthy adults? In summary, I urge this body not to set this precedent. Stick to your principles and do not go down this path. 14 members of this legislative body voted in favor of Bill 279-33, and in doing so, you stated for the record the principles you believe in, and therein set a precedent. Mr. Vice Speaker, if it is your intention to save lives, I suggest you choose a profession in medicine. It is your duty to represent the will of the people, not to play the role of mom and dad. It's not written in my testimony, but I'd like to say for the record, it is also not the duty of the government to go to war with business. Tobacco cessation should start in the household. The statistics did prove, but it was my mother and father that, because of the way they raised me, I didn't use tobacco till I was 22. And for me, it was a personal necessity, but it was also a personal choice because of the situation I was in. It's my personal belief that adults should be treated as such, and maturity and responsibility are developed by treating them as such with matching expectations. My testimony this morning is not meant to be a personal attack on your professional competency, Mr. Vice Speaker, but it is focused on you merely due to the fact that you are the singular sponsor of this bill. Si Dios Masi.
Thank you, Mr. Esteves. May I invite James Gillum to provide testimony at this time?
Yeah, this is going to be a little bit difficult for me. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I agree somewhat with Mr. Esteves on where you draw the line on the ability to make a choice, even if the choice is one that is going to have a bad outcome. I do agree with the science that shows that brain development is affected negatively by the use of nicotine, but there is an age band there that you're only adding two years to it. I'm not sure that and I'm sure there are people here who know the science better than I do, who show probably differently. But we do know that the three deadliest drugs in the country are tobacco, alcohol, and opioid. Okay, tobacco still being number one, and also the number one cause of lung cancer and deaths on Guam in 2013. So balancing that also with the cost, only to the groups that we cover under our Medicaid and MIP program, pharmaceuticals have become the highest cost item in our cost categories, and a lot of that is chemotherapy drugs. We've gone at the end of the quarter last quarter of 2015, we spent $23 million on pharmaceuticals, and again, majority of those being chemotherapy drugs. And first quarter of this year so far, $7 million. So there is a cost, obviously, with choosing to smoke. But I wonder, again, it's almost a political theory exercise, policy over practicality. We know what happened in New York when they tried to limit the amount of access to sugar-added beverages. We know what happens in some areas where you get referred to as the nanny state, and people do that to me all the time. So I do have this difficulty. I know it comes at a great cost, these choices. And it's the policymakers and I think, again, the implementers at our level, in the executive branch, to decide, do we want to continue to spend for care after the fact, or do we want to try to divert this money into more education, more prevention? I don't know if you can convince me that adding those 2 years age band, that 2 year age band is going to have a significant, even though there are some statements from IOM and a few others saying it'll reduce it by 12%. I don't know. I think also electronic cigarettes and our ability to determine really what's in that mix, because we don't have that ability here yet. We need to be able to test, the amount of nicotine that's in those. You pointed out very aptly that it does have an adverse effect on cell development and on. But again, it's that tension or that that problematic situation where wanting to do good things sometimes interferes with, again, free choice. But you're right. We have a very vested interest, at least in our population that we serve, to see if we can reduce the cost of the care. We're not, and I don't know, again, if adding those 2 years to that is actually going to have an effect. The group that we cover, of course, obviously has a tendency to have more smokers as a percentage. We probably need to divert more of our Medicaid and MIP funding into educational programs. The problem, again, is our love-hate relationship with the United States. We only have a limited amount of money to provide for care. We'd have to revise our state plan to provide for more education services, which, again, diverts money that we've been using for care. So I'm a little bit at a crossroads, having some real difficulty with this one, because I actually, when I checked off for and against, I checked them both. I can see the value in prevention. I don't know what the real return is if we raise the age by that 2-year band. Taxing it obviously higher has a diminishing return after a while. We have a black market already, as we talked about this morning. Cigarettes that are being brought in through a black market make them available and cheaper. I think we need more support for Guam wellness people and their tobacco program, more support for youth groups who are getting very active in tobacco and alcohol prevention programs. I think that's where the return is going to show. The earlier we get to our children, I think the earlier the better chance we have for more successful outcomes. We can continue to fiddle with age groups. I mean, where do we stop? We're going to decide that, well, you know what, 21 really isn't. We probably should make it 25. It just, and again, with all due respect to you, sir, because I know how much you are concerned with this and how much of an advocate you are. But I do have somewhat of a problem with supporting the whole concept. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Joel? Yes, if you may proceed. Thank you.
Good. Okay. My name is Joel Rubio. I'm a physician in the community and current president of the Guam Medical Society. And I present testimony on behalf of the society and a little later, if I may, as a personal physician. As healthcare professionals, we have the responsibility to safeguard our community's health. In our practices, we have repeatedly witnessed the tragic and costly impact of tobacco-related illness, noting that tobacco is an entirely preventable cause of premature death and disease. Our members conscientiously strive to provide healthcare services that meet clinical practice guidelines and quality standards. The Institute of Medicine, or the IOM, is a major source of the evidence base that guides and informs our profession. In March of 2015, the IOM, in its report on the public health implications of raising the minimum age of legal access to tobacco products, strongly concluded that raising the tobacco sale age to 21 will have a substantial positive impact on public health and save lives. The report predicts that raising the minimum age for the sale of tobacco products to 21 will, over time, reduce the smoking rate by about 12% and smoking-related deaths by 10%. Translate that into 223,000 fewer premature deaths, 50,000 fewer deaths from lung cancer, and 4.2 million fewer years of life lost across the nation. Subsequent data from localities that have implemented this policy, such as several municipalities in Massachusetts, document that youth tobacco use significantly declines after raising the legal age. Guam, if you read the statistics, has one of the highest smoking rates among all the states and territories. Moreover, our local data show that majority of today's smokers start before the age of 21. Our island community stands to benefit from this law. The inclusion of electronic cigarettes into tobacco control measures is also covered by the bill, and this is a move that the healthcare community welcomes. There is growing evidence of the harmful effects of these products, both from the chemicals in the cartridge fluid and e-vapor, as well as from explosion risks. Moreover, the nicotine in many of these e-cigarettes is highly addictive and sets the stage for future tobacco consumption. Earlier this month, the Food and Drug Administration extended its federal regulatory authority to e-cigarettes, validating the need to protect our youth from the adverse health impacts of these products. In the interest of public health, the Guam Medical Society strongly supports Bill 141-33. Our people's health is our island's most precious socioeconomic resource. By protecting our youth from tobacco and e-cigarettes, we are setting the stage for continued progress and development. Thank you from the Guam Medical Society.
Thank you, Dr. Rubio. I'd like to invite my colleagues if you have any questions for the panel before we release them. Okay. Thank you very much for providing testimony this morning. I'd like to now, by order of this submission, invite Renette Paris from Staywell Insurance. Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't indicate. Did you want to provide oral testimony?
Yes.
Okay, because it was scratched out here. And also, is Dr. Annette David in? Oh, you're Dr. Annette David. I'm sorry. And you're Renette Paris. Okay, thank you. Well, you're very similarly dressed. So,
Same here. Chic minds think alike.
and then I also have the Guam Comprehensive Cancer Coalition. Is there a representative? Okay. And we can also accommodate up here is Jenny Leon Guerrero? She's not here yet. Ms. Kathy Rivera Castro, if you'd like to join the group, you may at this time. Thank you. So, Doctor, you may proceed. Thank you.
Honorable Senators and fellow prevention advocates, thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of Bill 14133. Bill 14133 is like any good health policy. It is backed and guided by evidence and ethics. The evidence tells us why we have to do it right. The ethics tells us that it's important to do the right thing. There are many folks here at the table who will talk about the right thing and why we have to do this bill. But I am here as the chair of the State Epidemiological Outcomes Work Group, which is, to our knowledge, the longest-running data group here in Guam supporting prevention. And so I would like to focus on the evidence. And I think the way I wanted to frame this was 21 reasons for 21. And in the format of speed dating, we'll go through this 21 reasons in 15 minutes or less. So let's start. Reason number 1, tobacco is still the largest cause of death, and it is entirely preventable. This is data from the Department of Public Health, top 10 causes of death in Guam. As you can see, 5 out of the 5 top causes of death, 100%, are either caused or exacerbated by tobacco. And there are at least 2 others in the top 10 that are also contributed to by tobacco. And if you look at the data from the EPI work group, suicide is also linked. Tobacco use is a marker for suicide risk. So I would say about 8 out of the top 10 causes of death have a relation to tobacco, 100% preventable. That would not be such a big thing if we didn't have so many smokers. I am very sad to inform you that the latest data that just came out looking at 2014 survey across the nation shows again Guam is number 1. At one point we had dropped to below 25% for smoking prevalence, but today, as of 2014, we are at 29%. Second in the nation is West Virginia, which comes in at 26%. We are 3 full percentage points higher than the state with the highest smoking rate. So we are number 1. This is not a good thing to be number 1 for. Reason number 3, most of our smokers start before the age of 21. 2 out of 3 current smokers started before the age of 18, and 1 out of 3 started between the ages of 18 to 24. So current smokers, most of them started before the age of 21. We need to catch them before that age. Majority of Guam tobacco users, reason number 4, are addicted. How do we know that? When we look at our smokers and ask them, how many of you tried to quit in the past year? Over 75% of adult smokers said they tried, and over 80% of our youth smokers said they tried. The fact that they tried and still continue to smoke is evidence that they are addicted. Reason number 5, the earlier you start, the more likely you are to get addicted. And that is because this is an issue of physiologic vulnerability. We have heard previous testimony that is supporting choice. Why do we allow young people to join the military at 18 and we can't allow them to choose whether to smoke or not? My response to that is, it is not about choice. It is about physiology. When you join the military, you need physical strength. Physiologically, you are at your peak of physical strength and prowess at the end of your teenage years and young adulthood. But at this age, your brain is vulnerable to nicotine. And as you can see, the Institute of Medicine, adolescent brains are uniquely vulnerable to the effects of nicotine and nicotine addiction. And the U.S. Surgeon General, an earlier age of initiation, extends the potential duration of smoking throughout the lifespan. This is not about choice. This is about physiologic vulnerability. Reason number 6, in mathematical models, raising the legal age of tobacco use to 21 will have a substantial positive impact on public health. Dr. Rubio mentioned 12% less smokers, 10% less smoking-related deaths, and that results in millions of years of life saved. But in real life, that is validated. Needham, Massachusetts, the very first town in the U.S. to enact a law that raised the legal age to 21, showed that youth smoking rates decreased by 47%, nearly half, which was 3 times as much in the years following as the towns surrounding Needham that did not have that law. So we have real-life evidence that this policy works, and it protects the population we want to protect, the young people. Reason number 8, there is no evidence, on the other hand, of adverse impacts on businesses with the law. And in fact, smokers in the 18 to 20-year-old range who would be affected really account for only about 2% of the total cigarette consumption market. And in all the local jurisdictions in the U.S. that have enacted the law, no tobacco retailers have gone out of business. So there's no business issue here. Reason number 9, majority of the population support raising the minimum age for tobacco consumption. In the nation, 3 out of 4 adults support this. So, and this includes 7 out of 10 smokers. So the smokers themselves support this bill. And I think very importantly, we need to ask the ones who will be affected the most, youth. And I think we have some youth here, and I hope you will speak up. But youth support the measure as well. Here is one from an online debate.org. It said, the more they raise the age of smoking to 21, the better it is. By the way, I am not a native, and English is not my mother language, and I am 17 years old. And I also asked my son, Noel, who is 20 years old, and this is what he sent in. He said, there is no right to smoke. People may choose to use tobacco, but no government should legitimize what is a self-destructive habit that also harms the family and the environment. I am 20 years old and would be directly affected by this bill. I support it fully. Governments have the duty to protect the health of the people. That's what this law would do. And I laud Senator BJ for having the courage to put this forward. I think it's very important to get the youth, the voice of the youth in here. And I think this says it. The youth support the measure as well. And those who care for the youth, pediatricians, support this very strongly. The American Academy of Pediatrics just released late last year their recommendations on tobacco and e-cigarettes, and they strongly support restricting the age of sale for all tobacco products and e-cigarettes to 21. Moreover, this doesn't just protect those who are 18 to 20, it protects younger kids as well. Latest data, 2015 Youth Risk Behavior Survey for Guam, 1 in 5 high school youth and 1 in 10 middle school youth are current smokers. Many of these are under the age of 18. But how do they get their cigarettes? They get them mostly from the 18 to 20-year-olds who can buy them legally. And so by raising the legal age to 21, we are also protecting those under 18 who get their cigarettes from the 18 to 20-year group. So moving right along, 13, reason number 13, others are enacting this law. We could have been the first in the nation if we had enacted this last year. We could have been first. We could have beaten Hawaii, but Hawaii beat us, and just recently California passed this. And there are at least 145 localities in 11 states in the U.S. who have the same law, including New York City, Chicago, Boston, Cleveland, and both Kansas cities. And so we move on to the next part, which is why are we going to include e-cigarettes in the law? And I think it's important to introduce here what are e-cigarettes, and the technical name is really ENDS, Electronic Nicotine Delivery System, known as e-cigarettes, and the reason why they're called this way is because they deliver nicotine and or other substances to the user in the form of a vapor, which is why the popular name for using e-cigarettes is vaping. This is how they work. There is a battery inside that atomizes a liquid that is found in the cartridge and delivers that in the form of a vapor to the user. And e-cigarettes claim to be healthy, they claim to help people quit smoking, and they claim to be safe. And this is an example of a claim that they come out. No toxic chemicals, no harmful tar, no scoff, no smelly clothes, etc., etc. So let's move on to reason number 14. Why should we include e-cigarettes in Bill 14133? Well, the truth is e-cigarettes are toxic. The problem is that they have not been regulated up until this point, and so we don't know exactly what is in them. But we do know some things. Propylene glycol, which is a major ingredient, never been studied. It is a known pulmonary irritant. And in studies that have been done, they have found heavy metals like lead, nitrosamines, diethylene glycol, and carbonyls, all of which are either toxic or carcinogenic. E-cigarettes contain nicotine, which is highly addictive. And I just wanted to call your attention to the chart. Really what it shows is in a cigarette, you get 15 puffs. In an e-cigarette, you get about 100 puffs. And that delivers about 10 times the nicotine that a single cigarette stick would deliver. So this is not a safer alternative. It will not help you quit because it is giving you more of the substance that keeps you hooked. In fact, a study released by Stan Glantz in 2014 showed that smokers who turn to e-cigarettes are 1/3 less likely to quit smoking than smokers who did not use them. They do not help you quit. And even if they claim to be nicotine-free, reason 16, there is still nicotine, very likely, because the FDA, when they took a survey of all supposedly nicotine-free e-cigarettes, they found nicotine in all except one sample. So it still has nicotine. E-cigarette vapor also contains measurable amounts of carcinogens, among them formaldehyde, which is used to embalm you when you die, acetaldehyde, benzene, and nitrosamines. I think very importantly, e-cigarettes cause collateral damage. So it's not just what you breathe in, but the refill bottles, and they sell them now in bottles to save money, contain the nicotine. Now, keep in mind that nicotine is a strong toxin, used to be used to poison rats. The fatal dose is about 30 to 60 milligrams for adults. For children, it's about 10 milligrams. 1 teaspoon of a 1.8% solution could be lethal to a 90-kilogram person. And we already have documentation that this is causing toxicity. In fact, calls to the poison control centers for e-cigarette exposures have increased exponentially. We have had at least one reported case of a suicide death from IV injection of nicotine liquid, and one documented child death from accidental ingestion of the refill liquid. So this is the collateral damage that we need to think about. And it is an explosive issue because they do explode. And if you go to YouTube, you will see many videos that document this, but I just wanted to show you 3 actual cases. First one is this young man who had it explode that he was using it. The second one that you have up in the upper right hand, he was actually vaping when it exploded, and part of the e-cigarette entered his trachea and then had a secondary explosion in there. And the third case was a young man who had it in his pocket and it exploded while he was walking. I will mention that all these people are 21 years old or younger. The young man on the left was 16, young man upper right was 21, and the young man below, lower left was 20. Do we really want our children in close proximity to these explosive devices? And it is growing very rapidly amongst our youth, both nationally and in Guam. I think the data is quite worrisome. First time we asked this was last year in our high schools. And we asked our high school and middle school youth, how many of you have ever tried it? 3 out of 5 high school, 2 out of 5 middle school have tried it. How many are current users of e-cigarettes? 1 in 3 high school, 1 in 4 middle school. 1 in 4 middle school students in Guam is a current user of e-cigarettes. Finally, why should e-cigarettes, even if they don't contain tobacco products other than nicotine, be included in tobacco control policy? Because they are owned by the tobacco companies. E-cigarette companies are the tobacco companies. Blue, which is very popular in the US, was bought by Lorillard. R.J. Reynolds makes Views and markets them in Colorado and Utah. Altria, previously known as Philip Morris, Mark 10 in Indiana, and Green Smoke is what they sell. British American Tobacco markets in the UK, and Swisher International makes e-cigars. Very welcome to have the FDA include e-cigarettes now. Can you imagine? 1 in 4 of our middle school, 1 in 3 of our high school. Are these regulated by law? Yes. Internationally, we have at least 18 countries that have banned the sales and marketing of e-cigarettes, banned them completely, including in our region, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, and Taiwan, and Brunei. Federal law, yes, as of May this year. Local law, we have a bill prohibiting the sales and distribution. In other states, we have at least 46 states that prohibit sales to minors, so most of the U.S. states do that. And we have other states that restrict its use in smoke-free venues. Institutional policy, I think we have to congratulate Public Health, UOG, GCC, and DODEA because they ban the use of e-cigarettes on campus. Now, if they enforce this completely, we have to congratulate them even more. And while DOT is looking at a ban on planes, airlines have already implemented these bans. It's a smart move. 21 reasons for 21. I think we should support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. David. That was quite a moving presentation, very impactful. Will you be making this available to the committee?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think that would be a very good thing to add to the committee report. At this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Paris to provide testimony.
Hello. Half a day. My name is Rynette De Castro Perez. I am the Health Management Coordinator for Staywell Insurance Company. I am here today on behalf of Staywell to offer testimony and first-hand information on the true cost of medical care for smoking-related diseases and complications. In the health insurance industry, medical care expenses involve various types of health services, whether for inpatient or outpatient doctor visits, for laboratory tests, for imaging procedures, for prescription drug medications, or hospitalization. Medical costs for smoking-related illnesses pose a significant burden to our community and to the healthcare industry. To illustrate this, we looked at the cost pattern for a demographic commonly afflicted with chronic illnesses, patients who are 65 years of age or older. In 2014, we found that a 65-year-old non-smoker with common chronic illnesses would utilize about $9,466 worth of healthcare services annually. This translates to approximately $789 per month for doctor visits, inpatient hospital treatment, and maintenance medications. In contrast, a 65-year-old patient with a primary diagnosis of malignant neoplasm or cancer of the bronchus or lung caused by chronic smoking registered dramatically higher utilization, with expenses totaling $480,954 in a year, or approximately $40,079 per month. That's $40,079 each month spent on hospitalization, consultations, procedures, tests, and cancer medications. These medical costs also included the treatment of other secondary illnesses caused by prolonged smoking, such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, emphysema, and immune disorders. This scenario under the same demographic and similar time period pointed to a striking difference in cost, with expenses for smoking-related illnesses being 48.9 times higher than expenses for illnesses that are not related to smoking. Thus, Stay-Well Insurance is in support of legislation that will prolong or discourage smoking, the use of tobacco or related products, and of measures that will protect our youth. Thank you for your time.
Before we go on, I just want to acknowledge the presence of Senator Nicolas, who is our chairman of the Committee on Finance and Taxation, General Government Operations, and Youth Development. Good morning, Senator. Ms. Rivera, if you may proceed. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and half a day. I beg the indulgence of the committee as well as the members present here. Jenny Leon Guerrero Garrett, the mother of Natasha, the namesake of the Natasha Protection Act, has asked that when I present my testimony and she's unable to make it, if I can please read her testimony first. So I would like to read hers. Good morning, Senators. My name is Genevieve Leon Guerrero Garrett. My daughter, Natasha Leon Guerrero Perez, is the namesake for the no smoking law for our island. Several months ago, I had testified on behalf of the expanding of the no smoking regulations, and I was presently relieved that the 2016 community support for upgrading her law had been reached. 10 years ago, on June 9th, my daughter passed, and the rally of businesses were lined up in protest to Natasha's no smoking bill to move forward. I sit here today to celebrate how time and education has moved us all forward to a healthier Guam. One might think that 10 years ago, such legislation of the Natasha no smoking bill was considered progressive. Thanks to former Senator Lou Leon Guerrero, Senator B.J. Cruz, and Senator Judy Wampat, 10 years ago, 3 aggressive and committed senators laid the groundwork for our island to support legislation that has moved our island in making healthier choices. A fantastic example of our community making better choices are the successful 5K runs and/or marathons that 10 years ago were less than 200 to 300 runners. Now at times 500 to 800 runners strong, if not more. Younger people are being led by example by their elders to make better choices. In fact, our neighboring islands and visitors have remarked how envious they are of us in this arena. Viva Guam! Today, a proactive legislation, Bill number 141-33, is before you. As our elected officials, you have the ability to be that progressive senator that sees beyond the trees, so to speak. How many of us here today have been painfully affected by cancer? Your friends, your extended family, our parents, your child, your daughter, or your son? The greatest hardship I have experienced is that of cancer. Before cancer affected our lives, I thought stress was driving down Marine Corps Drive stuck in traffic. I thought that standing in line at the bank with 15 people ahead of me was a burden. I recall being annoyed when the grocery line would be a handful of people ahead of me when I wanted to make dinner before 6 p.m. How detached I was from the world of cancer. My definition of stress has now been redefined. Cancer does that to you. When my daughter was diagnosed and struggled with a childhood type of cancer, my stress was, did I do the best I can do for her? Did I find the right doctors? By the way, when I would hear other cancer patients who went for a one-day chemotherapy, I didn't think that was possible. My daughter was inpatient for her chemotherapy treatment for 5 days every 2 weeks. Forget about making dinner. I would leap for joy if my daughter would just sip a bit of soup. Forget about lines. I was thankful that my daughter would be able to still have options for surgery or chemotherapy. Stress redefined for me is if you live or die. Now my perspective of life is if it is not cancer, how hard can it be? So much of that we do with groups such as the American Cancer Society and the Coalition Groups from Public Health and Social Services stand together with clarity that prevention is the key. We encourage women to do mammograms. We educate people about the risk behaviors such as alcohol consumption, risk of smoking, unprotected sex are the examples of consequences of high-risk behavior. Watch a movie at GPO and public education is right there before the previews. Outreach and education programs are doing a fantastic job. Still, all the preventive education is not enough. It is like having a right hand, but the left hand is tied up. Do we need to regulate? Absolutely. Here is an example. We have speeding and DUI laws. The laws would have little merit if our citizens were not concerned about the consequences after work happy hours at bars or restaurants. Through education, a designated drive concept was born. Through enforcement, random DUI checkpoints were established. This is a splendid example of laws being supported. I'm hopeful that enforcement will be financially supported through the Healthy Futures Fund. Bill 141-33 is the support needed to partner with prevention. It will be the left hand. Enforcement is critical for change. Consequences for businesses through legislation will encourage vendors to redirect their efforts to older adults, those over 21. Vaping is relatively new to our island. My daughter Natasha has given her name for no smoking in restaurants. Perhaps community that take an action is often a reaction when someone dies. Hence, a law will be named in honor. Sadly, in time, this legislation will have a name attached to it. I have read the literature on vaping. Interestingly, perspective. CDC research is ongoing, and I'm sure that in a few years I'll give it 5 years, that the alternative point of view from vaping communities will be discussed. I struggle to understand how inhaling foreign particles on regular basis will be deemed safe. Congratulations to Hawaii and California. Vaping is now regulated. As an observer seeing people vaping, it is an annoyance of my personal space. The secondhand vapor is an intense cloud of fumes that I am quick to walk away from. I'm sure that senators here today have had the similar and concerns of secondhand vaping. As a former educator, I taught high school students that engaging in risk behaviors have consequences. This bill provides an opportunity for young adults still in the formation of risk behavior to not having nicotine before the age of 21. It would be the discernment of our legislatures to discourage businesses to not sell vaping products to those 21 years old and below. I could just wait for Bill 141 to eventually pass. Eventually. I could play a passive role and let others share and take the lead. But I can't. I sit here today with some blessed news to sharing. My husband and I have adopted twin infants. Our daughters, Sophia and Julia, are 5 months old. I know that their older sister, Tosh, would share with me that I have to pursue this for their sisters. Sophia and Julia deserve an even healthier Guam. Sidus Maasi, and thank you for your time. Genevieve Leon Guerrero Garrett. And now I would like to present my testimony. Earlier I had submitted my written testimony with quite a few attachments, and I would like to submit additional attachments to.
The Vice Speaker would delight in reading that, page by page.
Yes. So, half a day. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you and share my thoughts and support for Bill 141-33. My name is Catherine Marie Rivera Castro, and I'm a volunteer with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, a member of the Tobacco Control Action Team with the Non-Communicable Disease Consortium. I am a mother and a grandmother. I often speak about my son Andre, his medical condition, and the challenges he and our family has had and continue to face today. Over the last several years, we have received much assistance from many different organizations and entities. Because of this, my son is still with us today, lives in California, and continues treatment. How does this mother say thank you for having her son today? By being involved in my community and by advocating for policy changes, as well as creating awareness for the needs of our people and how we must all work together to create a healthier island community. I have watched my son fight for his life more than once, and no one should ever have to experience this with a loved one. When he was first diagnosed, one of the things I had promised him was, "Son, you concentrate on fighting this disease, and I will fight anything and anyone to get you what you need to survive." And thus began my quest. What better way to honor him and to fulfill that promise I made that day than to be here today? In the past several months, I, along with members of the Tobacco Control Coalition, have met with each and every one of you personally to dialogue with you about this bill and the issues surrounding tobacco use in our community. In these meetings, we have presented you with much information, data, statistics, and personal experiences as to how tobacco has affected the health of our people. I'm here today to thank 8 senators that have made a commitment to me and to the coalition for their support for this bill and our cause. I would like to acknowledge these 8 senators. They are Vice Speaker B.J. Cruz, Speaker Judy Wampat, Senator Frank Blas Uggan Jr., Senator Tina Muñoz Barnes, Senator Narissa Britannia Underwood, Senator Tommy Morrison, Senator Tony Atta, and Senator Tom Atta. These 8 senators have shown the courage to take a stand on this important health issue for the betterment of our community. And I once again want to personally acknowledge them with my heartfelt thank you. This bill will forever change the access of tobacco products and classify all electronic cigarettes and electronic cigarettes components and products as a tobacco product. We are all very much aware that currently much of our underage users rely on social sources such as friends to get their tobacco products. They are 18 years old in our high schools. This is their social circle. Raising the minimum legal age, MLA, to 21 will mean that those who can legally obtain tobacco are less likely to be in the same social networks as high school students. This may be only one deterrent, but nonetheless, it is one deterrent and one more that we should help our young people. Every change must begin with one action, even if that action means standing by an issue that is not very popular with some. But for me, my grandchildren are what I am fighting for. Being a responsible adult or parent and ensuring the well-being of those we love and care for is one of our primary responsibilities and obligations. To make the environment they live in a healthier one is one way of fulfilling this. I wish to quote a statement made by the Institute of Health in a brief published in March 2015. The public health impact of raising the minimum legal age for tobacco products depends on the degree to which the local and state governments change their policies. These decisions will depend on each state's or locality's balance between personal interests and the privacy of young adults to make their own choices versus society's legitimate concerns about protecting public health. The Institute of Medicine Committee makes conclusions about likely public health outcomes of raising the minimum legal age for tobacco. Overall, in the absence of transformative changes in tobacco markets, social norms, and attitudes, or in the knowledge of patterns and causes of tobacco use, the committee is reasonably confident that raising the minimum legal age will reduce tobacco use initiation, particularly among adolescents between 15 to 17 years of age, improve the health of Americans across the lifespan, and save lives. In 2014, the Guam Epidemiology Profile had indicated that tobacco use marked disparities across socioeconomic gradients. The poor and less educated tend to smoke more. Conversely, the rich and well-educated have the highest rates of never smoking. This is a great impact on our economic standpoint in our community. Health-related conditions from this socioeconomic group rely mostly on public assistance for health care, which places a great burden on each of us. In an article published on January 14, 2016, in the Public Health Report's website, it indicated that a law such as this is an important one because adolescents are particularly vulnerable to long-term neurological harm from nicotine use. As the Surgeon General had explained, when a still developing brain is exposed to nicotine, it is reshaped in a way that introduces long-lasting vulnerability of addiction to nicotine and other substances of abuse. Consequently, adolescent tobacco use to heavier daily consumption, stronger nicotine addiction, and more difficulty quitting tobacco use later in life. By contrast, if smoking initiation can be delayed beyond the adolescent years, it is far less likely to ever occur. And in March 2008, the Tobacco Control Legal Consortium held a symposium entitled There is No Legal Constitutional Right to Smoke 2008. I'd like to address 4 key points that they had addressed were, there is no such thing as a constitutional right to smoke, since the U.S. Constitution does not extend special protection to smokers. Smoking is not specifically protected liberty right under the Due Process Clause of the Constitution. The fundamental right to privacy does not apply to smoking. Smokers are not a specifically protected category of people under the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. Since the Constitution does not extend special protection to smokers, smoke-free legislation need to only be rationally related to legitimate government goals. Because there is no specifically protected right to smoke, tobacco control advocates can work to amend or repeal state laws that stand in the way of tobacco control efforts. And their conclusion was that the so-called right to smoke is actually a smoke screen. There is no constitutional right to smoke. Therefore, advocates are free to seek enactments of new smoke-free laws or the amendment to repeal of existing laws that harm the public health, despite claims that their opponents invoking a right to smoke. So as a proposed smoke-free legislation is rationally related to a legitimate government goal, the Constitution will not stand in its way of passage. Courts are quick to find that smoke-free legislation is rationally related to a legitimate government goal, since they have a long held that protecting the public health is one of the most essential functions of government. So I appeal to each of you as the elected leaders that are entrusted with the privilege of enacting legislation for our protection and betterment of our island to seriously consider the positive impact this bill will have on our island, our youth, and our future. I urge you to give it your full, undivided, and unequivocal support. I alone cannot do this. Our coalition as a whole cannot do this. But with your support, we will take the steps to ensure that we are doing our fiduciary responsibility of protecting our youth from the negative effects of tobacco and its related products. I keep you all and your fellow colleagues in the legislature in my heart of prayers as you continue to improve the quality of life for each of us. Thank you once again for allowing me the opportunity to come before you, make my plea to you on behalf of my grandchildren and all our children in the community. And I did not include this in my testimony, but I would like to also raise a point that should this bill move forward, I would like to address the committee to take a look at Chapter 6 of the Tobacco Control Act of 2006, where in Article 1, subsection 6101, where it defines what a tobacco product is, subsection G, if we would consider, it states, tobacco products means any tobacco, cigarette, cigar, pipe, tobacco, smokeless tobacco, chewing tobacco, or any other form of tobacco, which means may be utilized for smoking, chewing, inhalation, or other means of ingestion, that should this bill move forward, we add and amend this to add electronic cigarettes components, and its products, just to redefine the law. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank all of you. I have a new love, Miss Perez. No offense. No. Those are great statistics. And now I understand why maybe you're only on the health insurance side. But in the life insurance side, I note that if you're applying for life insurance, that they ask you the question about whether or not you smoke. And even I noted that in some companies in the States, and I'm not sure if it's required when you apply for health insurance here, whether or not the fact that you're a regular smoker affects your ability to be able to be covered. I do know that was in some places. As long as you're talking about this whole thing.
Under the Affordable Care Act, which we all know as Obamacare, they did remove the provision for health insurances to deny coverage based on pre-existing conditions. However, smoking is not considered a pre-existing condition under the Affordable Care Act. It's considered a insurance risk. So in the mainland United States, they do ask whether or not you're a smoker, and local insurance companies here on island also ask that on the application form.
Please make sure we get a copy of those statistics. That's some of the best statistics I've heard in a long time, and I thought I was doing a lot of research, but you obviously did some excellent work there in putting together those statistics. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Nicolas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have a couple questions. I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't get your name.
Rynette Perez.
Rynette Perez?
Yes.
From Take Care, right? Stay Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah. So, Rynette Perez from Stay
That's
Well.
Dr. David to you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sure.
So no, I really appreciated your testimony. You touched on some data that for me is very compelling. And I wanted you to be able to restate it so I can just make sure I heard it clearly. You said that the cost to treat those who smoke was 48 times higher?
48.9 times higher based on the same demographic that do not smoke.
Okay.
Correct.
And Dr. David, I wanted to just clarify because your data all kind of correlates for me. You mentioned some statistics that stated that if individuals smoked before age 21, they had a higher propensity to continue smoking. So what was that? What was that data specifically?
The data shows that the brain of adolescents, in particular before the age of 25, but 21 being a good marker, are much more vulnerable to the effects of nicotine addiction. So that smokers who start before the age of 21 are much more likely to remain smokers throughout their lifetime and to have difficulty getting rid of the habit.
Okay, and the reason why these two pieces of information are so important to me is because, Madam Chair, I wanted to kind of put it into the greater context of what we're facing here in our island community. You know, we hear in the news regularly that our hospital is struggling for funds. It's underfunded. We hear about the cost of insurance being prohibitive for people being able to get it or for companies to be able to provide it to their employees. And when those costs are getting increased 48 times more because of smoking, and if we're having a higher propensity of people smoking because we're enabling them to smoke before the age of 21, this isn't just a question of individual freedoms. This is a question of public policy as it relates to taxpayers and whether or not our tax dollars are being fairly apportioned to meet the needs of the community, and whether or not the tax dollars should be subsidizing the tobacco industry. Because technically that's what we're doing if we allow people to smoke before age 21. We're subsidizing the tobacco industry because those people will continue to smoke. They'll rack up the costs of treatment 48 times more, and our taxpayers will be subsidizing that in GMH or subsidizing it in our health insurance plans here in the government of Guam, or paying it out of their own pocket in their own private health insurance plans. So, Madam Chair, I just wanted to kind of put that on the record in this hearing so that as we transcribe this, we can understand it from a public policy perspective that the question of freedoms aside, when you're impacting tax dollars, that needs to be taken into context with respect to every single taxpayer in this community. And based on the information that these ladies have provided, it looks like this policy would help to reduce the tax burden on paying for treatment for patients at GMH. It will reduce the tax burden on our health insurance costs, and it will reduce the health insurance costs overall if we're able to pass this bill. So I just wanted to state that for the record, Madam Chairman. Thank you, ladies, very much. That was very, very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Doctor,
If I may, Senators, there is a testimony here on behalf of the Guam Comprehensive Cancer Control Coalition. The chair was unable to be here, so with your permission, I would like to read the very short testimony. This is, Dear Senators, half a day. Thank you for sponsoring Bill 14133, relative to clarifying the definition of e-cigarettes, raising the minimum age of legal access to tobacco products and electronic cigarettes to 21 years, and citing this act as Youth Protection Act of 2015. The Guam Comprehensive Cancer Control Coalition supports Bill 14133, which will raise the age for tobacco products and electronic smoking devices to 21. This bill is important because nationally, 95% of adult smokers start before they turn 21. A majority of tobacco users begin during their youth and continue into young adulthood. Delaying the initial use of tobacco products would be highly beneficial. According to the 2013 Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's national survey, 88% of adults who have ever smoked daily report that they first smoked at the age of 18. This means that the majority of adult smokers become regular daily smokers between the ages of 18 and 21. Moreover, according to the 2015 Guam Youth Risk Behavior Survey, 51.5% of high school students in Guam have tried to smoke cigarettes. High school seniors make up 57.7% who have tried cigarette smoking. The Institute of Medicine stated that because the brain is still developing during this period, there is greater susceptibility risk for nicotine addiction to occur before the age of 21. A 2015 report released by IOM predicts that raising the minimum age to purchase tobacco products has the potential to dramatically improve public health in this country. According to the report, raising the minimum legal age to 21 nationwide is predicted to reduce smoking prevalence by 12% and smoking-related deaths by nearly 10% for future generations. Bill 14133 will make it harder for young adults and adolescents alike to access and become addicted to cigarettes and other tobacco products. This legislation is part of a comprehensive strategy to reduce youth consumption of tobacco and prevent lifelong addiction. Bill 14133 is critical in preventing the harmful effects of smoking in our community. We commend you for making the right choice for our people, and we encourage your colleagues to do the same. Please act now and pass Bill 14133. Sincerely, Mr. Jared Ivey, Chairperson, on behalf of the Guam Comprehensive Cancer Control Coalition.
Sus Masi, everyone. Thank you very much. I have on our list of people that were wishing to provide oral testimony. I have the Youth for Youth group. I have Ms. Chan and Mr. Al-Cairo of the Guam Youth Congress. I was thinking about saving the Youth for Youth for last, because I think that this being the Youth Protection Act of 2015, that in my estimate your voices matter the most, and I'd like to close out this session with your testimony, if that's okay. And thank you very much for being so patient. Your presence is note it from up here, and quite impressive. Is Miss Chun available? Oh, Mr. Chun, I'm sorry. I misread this. Thank you. And Mr. Alcairo? All right, I'll invite you two to provide your oral testimony, and then we'll close out with the Youth for Youth group. Mr. Chun, you may proceed. Thank you.
Hi, half a day. Good morning. My name is Corey Chun. I'm here on behalf of the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, which is the advocacy arm of the American Cancer Society. The ACS-CAN, we're what we call ourselves for short because it's such a long name. We support Bill 141, a measure that would raise the minimum age for sale of cigarettes to 21 years old. This bill is important because nationally, 95% of adult smokers start before they turn 21. Additionally, adolescents' brains are more susceptible to the effects of nicotine and nicotine addiction, so it's critical to protect young people from tobacco products. A recent report released by the Institute of Medicine back in March of 2015 predicts that raising the minimum age to purchase tobacco products has the potential to dramatically improve public health in this country. According to the report, raising the smoking age to 21 predicts 12% smoking-related decrease for our future generations. So we do know that tobacco companies heavily target people from the ages of 18 to 21 by a variety of marketing activities, sponsoring music and sporting events, bar promotions, college marketing promotions, college scholarships and parties, because they know it is a critical time period for solidifying tobacco addiction. Increasing the age for sale of tobacco products at 21 will help counter the industry's efforts to target young people at a critical time when many move from experimenting with tobacco to actually continuing to use the product in an addictive nature. It will also help keep tobacco products out of high schools, where younger teens often obtain tobacco products from older students. Bill 141 will make it harder for young adults and adolescents alike to access and become addicted to cigarettes and other tobacco products. This legislation is part of a comprehensive tobacco control strategy that includes a significant tobacco tax increases, implementing a comprehensive smoke-free air law, and fully funding best practices of tobacco prevention and cessation efforts. So really, this is not the silver bullet to solving the problem, but a key piece in doing so. I'd also like to address two issues for the committee that to share our perspective from the cancer lens. And so the first issue came up in an editorial on Sunday. It was a great editorial from the Pacific Daily News. And I would just like to paraphrase. It's the first perspective is why tobacco and why 21. So in the editorial, they mentioned if raising the age is the case here in Guam, what will be made next illegal to people under 21 because it's bad for health? Sugar-laden sodas, candy gum, ice cream, and pastries. And so our real concern here, as I mentioned before, is tobacco and nicotine addiction. A lot of people can say they're addicted to Diet Coke or candy, and I might have been, in all honesty, I might have said that, a few years ago myself. But in truth, being addicted to these things is nothing like being addicted to tobacco. There is no similarity. They're vastly different. And I will defer to the physicians in the room on that point. The other point I want to make is tobacco is the only legal product sold that, when used as directed, can kill you. I mean, that's just basically what it is. There's no real safe way to use a tobacco product. So the next issue that always comes up, you hear a lot is, so if someone has the ability to choose whether to serve in the military, then they should also have the ability to choose to use tobacco products. And so, that's a fair perspective, but I would just like to share our perspective, which is that we feel we owe it to our military members, especially our younger members, who are most susceptible to tobacco addiction, to prevent them from a lifelong addiction to tobacco, diseases that could probably affect their fitness and readiness, and also premature death. We feel that they're a part of our community. And, you know, I work a lot with people who have cancer, cancer patients, and survivors and their families. And I hear this statement a lot where they say, I don't wish cancer on my worst enemy. And so this is kind of where we're coming from. We're just trying to save lives here, and we urge your support. And I'll also just note, I am visiting here from Hawaii, and as part of the coalition that helped pass the a similar legislation, I'd be open to any questions you had on that process. So thank you very much.
Ms. Mossy. Mr. Alcairo?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senators. For the record, my name is Lawrence Alcairo, the Speaker of the 30th Guam Youth Congress. I also am the only sworn-in member right now on the Advisory Council on Mental Health and Substance Abuse for the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. I'm not sure if that makes me an automatic chair, and I can't speak on behalf of the board unless I am the chair. But I think more importantly, I come before you as a private citizen in support of this measure. I want to say, first off, thank you. Just by being here today, you guys are my favorite senators. In no particular order, I'd like to add. But you have the vote of our youth. They're clearly behind you, behind me, and your presence here, I know it doesn't necessarily mean that you support this measure wholeheartedly, but just the fact that you're here to hear our voice shows that you support us and that you can expect the same support from us when the time comes. And I think also more importantly, I'd like to thank the people behind me for their selfless act in advocating for such a measure. They deserve for more than a round of applause, and I'm glad to call a few of them behind me mentors as well. You know, they're not here to protect the so-called right to smoke, but rather fight for the health of the community. And for the person that gave that the list of senators that said they would support, I'd also like the list that hasn't pledged support, and I'd like to speak to them personally. I'm glad that I've come after everybody else so that they could give all the statistics. With FESPAC going on, I personally didn't prepare a formal written testimony. And I didn't want to do all that research anyway. I just finished finals at UOG, and kudos to UOG, GCC, and the community for the smoking bans on campus. But I think FESPAC is a good segue because I want to first talk about how FESPAC is here to celebrate culture, and tobacco is not part of our culture. It's been ingrained into the people of Guam by outside influences, the same way it was ingrained into the military by those same outside influences. Members of our military, especially those who have gone through near-death experiences, can be just as vulnerable as young minds. So on a side note, thank you for fighting for our veterans as well, Senator Ogden and other senators. The consequence of Guam being a spoil of war heavily brought that outside influence. And you can see it in more than just smoking. I mean, you see Tabasco on Guam everywhere. I mean, I think that's a good thing. You see Spam on Guam. I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing. And then you also see cigarettes. We talked about the three most dangerous drugs earlier, alcohol and tobacco and opiates. With alcohol, there are studies going on whether or not it has benefits. Some say a little bit is okay. With opiates, they're often used as pain relief drugs. But there's no benefit to smoke. The only benefit of tobacco products is a quick death through pulmonary, cardiovascular disease or cancer. I want to touch up on what President Obama said in the State of the Union this year. It said that the U.S. needs to be the nation to cure cancer. And if we really want to do that, a good first step would just to make smoking illegal in general. Prevention is way better than having to try to solve this problem after the fact that it has occurred. We can't say let's educate to prevent when we can just stop it altogether and nip it in the bud. This number game that we use in terms of freedom, it's irrelevant because of the fact that tobacco should be illegal altogether. It's a harmful substance and there's no benefit to it. Age 21, I believe, is a small step, but it should be illegal altogether. But politics won't make that happen. Big Tobacco has enough influence in Congress to ensure that their interests are protected, though hopefully that's not the case in the future. Because even Obama himself said that, our dreams may be big, but as long as we take the small steps necessary to get there, we'll get there. A small personal story for me. My grandfather died 20 years ago from smoking cigarettes and he got cancer. He was influenced at such a young age because prior to emigrating to Guam, his family owned a tobacco business in the Philippines. My grandmother, his wife, who's still alive, still smokes non-processed tobacco. When I was young, I remember telling her that I didn't want to lose her, and she does her best to stop smoking, at least when she's around me. But, having dated my grandfather at such a young age, she's been so heavily influenced. And I personally feel that, from my perspective at least, if we can save one life with just a voice, and that's a yes on the floor, then I think we would accomplish what this measure is trying to produce. If one person could have their parents, grandparents here today, excuse me, then I think the world would be a better place. The last time I think I came before the legislature was during the pay raise hearing, when we talked about the illegal pay raises that went on. And the last time I said that I walked on the campaign trail with many of you, and that if you really meant what you said on the trail, then you would support the measure. This last weekend, many of you walked the Relay for Life. I walked beside you as well, in memory of my grandfather, and your presence there must have meant something. As the Speaker of the Guam Youth Congress, the duly elected voice of Guam's youth, I give this testimony in the same corollary as in terms of walking for the Relay for Life. If you really want to stop cancer, save lives, and celebrate birthdays, then you'll support this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's those heartfelt but also professional testimonies that make these public hearings so meaningful. And I want to thank you for taking the time to come and share with us today. Thank you very much. And we have one person indicated a desire to speak also, Mr. Peter Cruz. And if you're here, I'll invite you forward before I let the Youth for Youth, because I do want you to be the last voice in this public hearing. So, if you may. Mr. Cruz? Jesus Masi.
Thank you, Senators. I'll just try to make this short and sweet so we can get some time for the youth to speak. I'm just going to veer off from a little bit from the written testimony here. I just want to reiterate just a couple of things here. In July 2015, CDC came out with a study where 75% of the individuals, of adults, were in the yay for raising up the minimal age limit. Out of those, 65% were between 18 and 24. Were in agreed to lift up that minimal age limit. PDN did a survey here on December of 2015, and it came up that 75% were in favor. And just 7 days ago, PDN did again another poll, and 66 of the respondents were in favor of raising the minimal legal age to 21. I'm just really skipping because a lot of it's redundant from all the other testimonies. Our neighboring island of Palau has raised their minimal legal age to 21. On a side note, I just want to say, and I wish my fellow veteran would have stayed for Dr. DeWitt's presentation, and it would have made a little bit more sense that true Dr. DeWitt is right. At age 18, 19, you're at your prime. You're a bull. But the fact is that the developing of the brain, I am a tobacco cessation facilitator, and I tell my clients that come through my doors that below the age of 21, 25, while that brain is still developing, all it takes is 10 to 15 cigarettes in that course for you to become addicted to nicotine. Just 10 to 15, less than a pack, and you're addicted to nicotine at that age. After 21, 25, it takes about 75 to 100 And I want to commend the fellow veteran that, he was able to quit. But there's a lot of veterans out there that continue to smoke. And their health disparities are attributed to just that. And so please, I urge you to do pass this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Cruz.
Thank you.
Mr. Dela Cruz, would you like to provide some testimony before we have the Youth for Youth group come up? Okay, please join us.
My apologies. I really wasn't intending to provide oral testimony, but submit a written testimony on behalf of the agency that I represent, which is Guam's Alternative Lifestyle Association, who in the last 3 years have been partnered with the Peace Office in their efforts to address substance abuse within our LGBT community, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. And if you will, I would like to share some statistics on the numbers in regards to how smoking has deeply impacted. We talk about smoking and how it has impacted specific socioeconomic groups. When you look at the numbers in terms of demographics impacting those who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, those numbers are quite disproportionate compared to those who are non-transgender in those over 18 in our community. And if I may share some of that data with you. In the last 2 years, we had conducted a survey among 257 LGBT persons over the age of 18, and we specifically had asked them how smoking has impacted their lives. If they've ever smoked, what is smoking in terms of smoking within their lifetimes, and we found those numbers to be quite alarming. And if I may share some of that information with you. We had asked them if they've smoked over 100 cigarettes in their entire life. 63% of those who took our survey said yes. If you break down these numbers within the LGBT community, those numbers are even far greater. Among bisexual female, the numbers are 84%. Among transgender female, the number is 77.7%. Among bisexual males, the number is 69.2%. Among lesbians, the number is 62.3%. And among gay, the number is 51.5%. When you compare that with non-LGBT persons, our numbers are about 10 to 20% higher. We've also asked them to indicate if they currently were smoking. And so those numbers we found staggering as well. Those numbers are 48.9% within the LGBT community had said that they were current smokers. We have asked if they'd smoke every day, some days, and found as we look within the specific demographics within the LGBT community, bisexual men smoke at a higher rate at 77.7%. Transgender females smoke at 71.4%. Gays, males smoke at 68%. Transgender male to female smoked at 64%, and bisexual female smoked at 60%. And again, when you compare those numbers to the current adult smoking rate on Guam, it's about 30%. So these numbers are definitely disproportionate. We also had asked members within our LGBT community if they had attempted to quit smoking, which I think for us as an LGBT organization is good news. It shows that people are trying to quit smoking. And those numbers are 68.2%. And thus our work as an LGBT community in terms of advocating on their behalf, on their health needs. So I will provide written testimony as well along with this oral testimony, but I just wanted to provide those numbers and share what the demographics looks in terms of as we look at tobacco and its impact, those most vulnerable who are impacted by tobacco use include our LGBT community, and they smoke at an alarming rate, which have implications for us as an organization. And therefore, we urge you and applaud the efforts that this body has in terms of addressing, increasing the age of smoking. Thank you.
Situs Maasi. All right. Thank you very much for providing your testimony.
Thank you.
I would like to now invite the Youth for Youth Live Coalition to come, Youth for Youth Live Guam, to come up and provide testimony. Thank you very much for being very patient and sitting here. Although I think that the testimony provided ahead of you was quite informative, even for myself. There are many facts that had not crossed me before, and I'm sure that it was also very good for you to hear from many of the professionals here and the volunteers who give so passionately to this cause, to have provided a lot for all our benefits. But I'm going to leave it totally up to you to decide who you'd like to go first, so please feel free to begin.
Okay.
And state your name for the record. Thank you.
My name is Philip Salas. I am the current president of Youth for Youth Live Guam, and I will be reading our written testimony. Buenas and half a day from Youth for Youth Live Guam. Youth for Youth Live Guam is the evolution of a grassroots youth leadership movement that began in May 1988 in the meeting room of a Dedido parish. From that first meeting of 50 teenagers, pastors, and parents, Youth for Youth Live Guam has progressed into a nonprofit, community-based organization with a 28-year record for sustaining substance abuse prevention programs, practices, and policies. With a membership of about 60 young individuals between the ages of 11 and 17, Youth for Youth Live Guam partners with government agencies, private businesses, and other local nonprofit organizations to develop and sustain grassroots youth prevention services. As the youth of Guam, we urge you to vote in favor of Bill number 141-33. Thus far, over 130 cities in 10 states, including New York City, Kansas City, Chicago, Cleveland, Boston, San Francisco, and the entire state of Hawaii, have taken this important step in protecting our youth. For years, adolescent smoking rates have been coming down, although nearly 1 in 5 high school seniors still use tobacco. Now, however, adolescent use of e-cigarettes, nicotine vapor devices, hookahs, and small cigars has gone up dramatically, threatening to completely erase a decade of progress. The enormously powerful tobacco industry lobby has derailed initiatives in Congress, but where federal and state governance fails, local leadership has succeeded. Virtually all statewide workplace and public smoking bans began with the local government regulations. During the years from ages 18 to 21, youthful experimentation often accelerates into daily use. It's a time when the adolescent brain is highly vulnerable to the effects of a powerful addictive agent like nicotine. Exposure during this period may result in permanent neurological receptor changes that lead to a lifetime nicotine habit and resulting illness. Raising the nicotine and tobacco age will also better protect younger teens, as 90% of those who provide cigarettes to kids under 18 are themselves under 21. As a result, raising the tobacco sales age to 21 has been shown to reduce high school smoking by over 50%. Before we continue, my other officers are going to be reading other testimonies from our other organization members.
Yes, please. The floor is yours. You proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Sahagan, and I am the Vice President of Youth for Youth Live Guam. I will be reading 3 testimonies that I have with me right now from our youth members. The first testimony that I will be reading, this is one of our members that just is a little bit slow. It reads, "Dear Senator, please accept Bill 141-33 because our generation will be destroyed because people who are too young are getting cancer. So maybe if we turn the legal age to 21, that problem will be gone and our generation is safe until the next problem comes up." The next one reads, "Many people in many areas, including Guam, and those under the age or above the age of 19 right now have dealt with many issues with using tobacco products, and they affect their health in a dangerous way. Obviously, it affects their lungs and throat, and people can gain lung cancer just by using a cigarette or vape. It also affects their heart rate, which people die from heart attacks. Out of 40 million lives that are American and even more all over the world die by these small objects. raising the age to 21 shouldn't be a maybe, because it relates to alcohol by its own consequences. This bill should be supported and passed. And you may smoke or use tobacco or use other drugs. That's your choice and your preference to continue. But think of everyone on Guam and everyone else. Think about our generations, the future, others. Should they go through the same experiences we are going through now? Again, this must be notified. This bill should be approved other than in a questionnaire. Think of others than yourself. Think outside the box. And the last testimony that I'll be reading reads, Buenas and half a day. I write to you in hope that you will please support Bill 141-33, Youth Protection Act of 2015. I believe that the passing in this bill will help prevent an addiction to nicotine. I have a sister whom has been using tobacco products since her high school years, as far as I know. Well, I've been wanting her to quit, but she gets mad at me every time I bring it up to her. Even when she was pregnant, she consumed tobacco products. It really hurt to watch her do that to herself and her child. I don't want anyone else to go through what I go through, caring and getting yelled at for it. So I ask you to please support this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Pablo, and I am the Secretary of Youth People at Guam. I will also be reading 3 testimonies from our youth. So the first one says, Bill 141-33, Youth Protection Act of 2015. I believe the tobacco age should be raised to 21 because it saves lives and it creates better role models. The next one says, Dear Senators, the youth of Guam is kindly asking if you guys can pass Bill 141-33, the Youth Protection Act of 2015. Did you know that approximately 90% first use cigarettes before 19 years of age? Almost 100% before 226. If you guys pass this bill, it will help this generation. Smoking at 18 is too young. It takes lives when you're 18. Your lives have just begun. Do you want to die when you have your whole life ahead of you? Thank you for listening. Youth for Youth rules. To the senators, you should raise the age to 21 because it's bad for them. If they're under 18, it takes too much lives. From the research I did, 1,300 deaths every day and 42,000 dies from secondhand smoking. You should move the age to 21 because people need to see their family more. To the senator, please raise it.
Good afternoon. My name is Kiara Ariola. I am the current treasurer of Youth Flag Guam, and I also would be reading 3 testimonies. So the first one says, Dear Senators, I would love to say that I fully support you in what you're trying to do about the tobacco usage should be older than 18 years of age. The reason being is because tobacco is harmful and smoking it doesn't affect those who smoke it, but who they smoke around. Children, older folks, and those who can't be around smoking. I believe that it should be older than just 21 years of age. I believe it should be at least 25 years of age. What should be done is think about your children and the causes that tobacco use can do. Lung cancer, heart problems, and other dangerous problems. For me, I lost people I cared about to smoking. In order to get the percentage of tobacco use down is to raise the age limit. That's my opinion. From a concerned mother. Dear Senator Nicolas, I am writing to request the passing of this bill because it would dramatically improve the well-being of society. The newer generations of today are affected by this bad influence and are having their chance to live safely taken away. There shouldn't be a delay with the administration of this bill because in this time of pre-existing hesitation, lives can be affected for the better. The prevention of tobacco accessibility until the age of 21 would initiate a very beneficial reform. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Please consider it. Once again, thank you. I support the raising I support raising the legal age to purchase and consume tobacco products from 18 to 21. This law will enable our youth to be more aware of health hazards that is contributed from the use of tobacco products. Young adults younger than 21 do not get enough information from our educational system to make a responsible decision to use tobacco products. Raising the age will deter high school students 18 years old from purchasing tobacco products from both themselves and other minor students. Everyone already knows that smoking is bad, but cigarette is only one form of tobacco. This law will prohibit all other forms of tobacco that is not smoked, like snuff, e-cigarette, and vapor. In writing this law, our lawmakers must consider all aspects of tobacco products and how each and every type will affect me and Guam's future generation. Thank you.
Also to mention, on our Youth for Youth Live Guam Twitter, we tweeted, "We believe that Guam should raise the tobacco age to 21. Let us know what you think about that." Over an hour, we had 160 votes, and 69% said raise it to 21, and 31% said leave it at 18. I would like to ask for Senator Nicolas if he can come out. Sorry.
I just want to say that we underestimated your group. I was looking at 4 of you in the audience, and I think you brought the voices of close to 100 people just right here in this testimony, which is very much appreciated. And that's why I wanted to have you last, because we can always speak about what is good for you and what we think is good policy. But sometimes it's beneficial to us as we're weighing the options that are available to us as policymakers, what it means to those who are actually impacted. And the fact that you took the time to come here, that you prepared, and that you gathered the testimony from others within your group is very admirable. And I want to thank you for helping with this democratic process of not only bringing to light some of the issues that are important to debate, but bringing to us a point of view from those who are directly impacted by this legislation. So, Sidus Maasi, and I bring to you Senator Nicolas.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, yes, I'm navigating between phone calls here, but I understand someone had a question for me specifically.
I would like to ask where you stand on this bill, since you are the chair of youth development.
Yes, well, your testimony was very well received. I was on the phone in the back. I didn't want to be rude taking a call here, but there is a television back there, and I was listening to what you guys were saying, and it was very good testimony. Also to the financial statistics that were provided by Dr. David and Ms. Perez were very compelling from a taxpayer perspective. So from my point of view, I think it makes good public policy for us to be able to consider raising this smoking age to 21. I think it's important for us to understand that not only is it good from a health perspective for our young people, being the chair of youth development, but also being the chair of finance, it makes sense from a fiscal perspective. If our hospital is starving for cash, why are we going to continue to allow for policies that are going to exacerbate healthcare costs by 48 times over? Not 48%, 48 times. So for every dollar in medical care we would have provided, we're going to have to provide $48 in medical care because we did not raise the smoking age to 21. I mean, it all starts to make sense when you really sit back and think about it. I know that there's been some testimony provided that touches on some of the freedom questions and etc. I think some good testimony was provided to address the constitutionality question of smoking, but ultimately what it boils down to is we all have our individual rights, but our rights are not supposed to impede on the rights of others. And if our right to smoke is making healthcare costs be so expensive that we cannot treat people on this island because we don't have the money to treat them, then smoking policy is starting to impede the ability for us to provide healthcare to our people. So, I mean, for me, it just makes sense at this point. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Also, Senator Torres, can we also ask where you stand? Thank you.
Well, fundamentally, what I'm not inclined to do whenever somebody approaches me is I'm not inclined to sign off on anything, because I think that personally I like to be well-rounded. I like to be fair to all constituencies, because there are always two sides to every equation. And I think when you approach a policy, whether I personally agree with something right off the bat, I'm never inclined to just throw my hat and then just not listen. And part of my being here is I wanted to listen. I wanted to sit in here and not read a committee report that's going to come out, because it's all going to be in the committee report. But I wanted to be here so that I could face-to-face understand the emotions, understand the personal and professional perspectives that are going to be presented. So I'm not going to give you my indication of how I'm going to vote today. Although you can see by my being here, I'm very much moved by this presentation. I'm very much in favor of doing everything we can to not lure people into an addictive pattern if we can. That's one of the things that I hate the most. I hate bullying, and I hate coercion. I'm all about people being able to live without outside factors preying on the most vulnerable. But as a policymaker, I think I owe it to everybody to have an open mind and to go through the entire process, including when this bill goes before the floor, being able to entertain and argue and speak to whatever points are debated when this bill goes before the body. So that's just me. I just think that the process is a full round process, and if I say, I'm going to go this way, then that means my job is done. And I don't think my job is done until the vote actually goes before us and all the issues have been vetted and debated. So I'm not saying no, but I think that in all fairness, I just have to do my homework up until the last point where I actually say ungan or ahi. So, and I hope I hope that you can at least respect that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from you guys? Alrighty. Oh.
I just want to thank the four of you for representing the youth generation out there and providing your testimony this morning or this afternoon. You know, what's interesting is I've sat here and observed and listened very intently in terms of a lot of the testimony, and the scientific evidence provides information that the policy that would be appropriate is passing this bill from 18 to 21. But there's another component that we really need to focus on as a community, and that's the education and the compliance, the enforcement. Because even Dr. David shared with us a little earlier that 2 out of the 3 smokers they started smoking in high school, and that's below the age of 18. So the question is, how is it that individuals below the age of 18 are accessing cigarettes and are actually smoking tobacco before they reach that threshold that is allowed by law? So it comes back to, again, we need to put additional emphasis on education and enforcement. And I think that my office is working closely with the Vice Speaker at this point in time in terms of trying to find other ways where, in fact, we can move in that direction in terms of ensuring enforcement so that we can partner with the business community, we can partner with the entire community in terms of making sure that not only is the age going to be, I'm presuming now, going to be increased from 18 to 21, but that we have the proper enforcement out there so that we can ensure that individuals who are below the age of 21, that hopefully and ideally we have 0% of those individuals accessing tobacco or vaping. So that I just wanted to share that with the four of you, because I think that that's also a very critical component here. It's asking that question and making sure that we can do what we can to ensure that when we pass a law that we're able to follow it and we're able to ensure compliance. But thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon.
As a sponsor of the legislation, I really want to thank the four of you, and I especially want to thank Speaker Alcario for his testimony. The fact that you young people have come out and supported this. I'm the Manamco, I'm 65. So my doing it is, as they would say in the vernacular, irrelevant. But when you guys do it and come out and say you want this done, it really is impactful on the rest of the members here. And I remember when we did the legislation raising the age of alcohol consumption, I firmly believe that I would have lost that day, except for the fact that this room was filled with teal T-shirts. That was the color of the Youth for Youth, or the young people's T-shirt that year, I guess green and black and white, just this year's color. But whatever the color is, it was full. And when young people say that they're willing to give up something for a better life, we will listen. And I want to thank all of you for your testimony, and very heartfelt testimony. And even young Miss Paris, I thought she was a student, but obviously much brighter than I am in putting together statistics. So thank you very much, for everybody that has come out today in support of this piece of legislation. I'm hoping that we can get this through at the earliest possible date, but I really, really want to thank all of you for, as the chairman said, sitting through it and using smartphone, tweeting. My gosh, even getting. I'm glad that the statistics that you got was 40% were opposed, because that's a good thing to know, that it's not a biased group, but it's open to everybody. So thank you very much for that perspective, that your Twitter was out there and there were people that were opposed to it, because I'd be concerned if everybody agreed with me. But but thank you very much. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for conducting this hearing.
Thank you. And I just want to add, too, that I've never put a cigarette to my mouth, and my husband and my children don't smoke either, so that might give you a little hint about how I feel about this subject matter. But if there are no more individuals wishing to provide testimony today, I will now conclude the hearing on Bill number 141-33. And for those who are listening in the audience, the committee will continue to receive testimony on the item heard today. Please address any written testimony to the Committee on Finance and Taxation, General Government Operations and Youth Development. You may submit via electronic mail any testimony to Senator Nicolas at gmail.com. You may deliver any testimony to the legislature's mailroom or to Senator Nicolas's office at Suite 407 of the DNA building in Hagåtña, Guam. I want to sincerely thank everybody who has spent the time this morning to testify on this measure, which is really a life-altering piece of legislation for our island going forward particularly. And for your attendance today, I wish you all a very good week. And I will now call this hearing adjourned, and it is now 12:17 p.m. Si Zeus Maasi.